This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas. Ahoy! Captain David Gallimore welcomes you aboard the Regenerate Show, live Mondays, 10 a.m. Pacific on K4HD Radio at k4hd.com. We dive into the real messy work of transforming our lives, leadership, and organizations. Bring your hot mess and confusion. Leave with clarity, courage, and confidence. Together, let's strengthen our resilience, accelerating the health of ourselves, people, planet, and profits. Now, here's your host, Captain Dave, your personal regenerator. All aboard!
Welcome. I am so thrilled for kicking off episode 4 of Regenerate. And our theme today is organizational transformation. And I'm really blessed to have as our guest today, Chris Rue. He's a co-founder of Parallax Partners out of the UK. And he's a known regenerative kind of next generation leader and organizational thought leader, consultant, and coach. And I'm blessed to have him as my business and regenerative life and leadership coach since December of 2024. You know, this is going to be a bit of a different show than we've had. The last 3 have been more focused on the individual. And with Chris's help, we're going to look at the messy middle of transformational organizations, and especially around leadership in those organizations. Our show's promise to you, as you know, if you've been here with us before, is to have fun, because when we're laughing, we're learning, to leave you inspired and to leave you empowered. And I will promise you that Chris Rue will not let me off the hook without having clarity and at least a couple next actions as we delve into organizational transformation. So I want to support you. We want to support you not just to survive, but to flourish. And I invite you to grab some paper, digital or old school paper, and a pen, so that you might be able to review a few notes and take some next actions. And so I'd like to at this time welcome Chris Rue from Wales. Chris.
Thank you very much, David. It's a real pleasure to be here. And yes, I am in the wonderful country of Wales. We moved over here.
I'm not hearing
in
Chris.
August of last year. Hello?
Oh, there you are.
I'm hearing Chris.
Great.
So
sorry, you're back.
And the joys of the Welsh weather, being winter, of course, we do like our rain over here. So it has been throwing it down fairly recently, but it is a beautiful country. I'm very blessed to be here. And we moved over here as part of our own personal transformation, interestingly enough. So we have lots of time to think and regenerate ourselves. So we're trying to practice what we preach.
Yes, and I'm sure your dog River is just suffering mightily with not enough outdoor adventures and animals to go chase and explore.
Indeed. Yes, no, she's exercising my voice because she can now run over glorious. I have a great fortune of being within the body of a 250-acre farm, not mine, I hasten to add, but we have the ability to roam across it, and therefore I am shouting across the fields on many an occasion, River, come on back. So, she does seem to rather like exploring, but there we are. No, recall isn't too bad on occasion, but there we are.
Well, good on you to have you and Sarah, your wife, who's just, what a delight, get to read her work around kind of Tudor, and I understand you're quite involved with Tudor reenactments and tours. It's a fascinating part of English history.
Yes, well, we are somewhat obsessed, maybe a bit of a strong word, but we do rather enjoy the Tudors. My good lady, Sarah Morris, has written a number of books on the subject of Henry VIII and his 6 wives, and she does enjoy taking people around the wonderful locations that we have in the UK. In fact, I sort of met her through reenacting myself, and I do enjoy putting on the costumes and playing various Tudor characters. In very truth, I was playing Thomas Cromwell the last week, which was quite fun, has to be said. So if I drop into Tudorese every now and again, I do apologize. But May fellow, you are in fine fettle this fine day.
Oh, fabulous! So you got to play some darker characters in
yes.
English history.
Yes, I've misunderstood Thomas Cromwell. He certainly had his enemies. He was a very, very capable man, but he did put through some very significant changes. And yes, indeed. Don't get me started on the Reformation of the monastery. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, and of course, that period was just blessed with terrific writing, Shakespeare among many.
Indeed. And the changes that he wrote about were kind of interesting and have, stood the test of time, and people still refer to them to create color for the life of people at that time out of his writing, as well as his humor, some of which is quite dark as well, in terms of some of his plays, and talking about Henry VI, for example, but a subject of many of his conversations. But that's another story, really. And if I could happily talk for this next hour about Tudor reenactments and Tudor history. And you could argue that it's one of the earliest reinventions of organizational structure that Henry VIII actually did. He was the architect of many changes that still exist in the UK today. And yes, he wasn't popular in certain circles, not least for his treatment of women in one sense, but he did. But he made some very significant changes to the structure of the way that the UK operates.
Well, let's put that historic reference on pause for just a moment, but I would love to come back to it, because as we talk about, the different color schemes of organizations from red to orange, etc., there may be some historic references that you want to bring us back to.
Yes, well, you're leading us nicely into a conversation about teal or next generation leadership and the work of Frederick Laloux, who was something of an inspiration to myself and Sarah back in 2015, which I'm sure we'll come on to.
Yep. So before we do that, I would be remiss if our listeners didn't get a chance to get to know just maybe a little bit deeper for 5 or 6 minutes. So sadly, time is never our friend on a 50-minute radio show. But what's that one thing, Chris, that you love to be or do that just gives you the most joy in your life?
Well, if you'd asked me about 5 years ago, it would have been talking about skiing and throwing myself off mountains for no other reason than for fun, because it's just an absolute, you can't think about anything else when you're looking down a great slope. So I do enjoy that immensely. But I say 5 years ago because that was about the last time I went skiing. And having been obsessed with making our move to transform ourselves to come to Wales, that's sort of occupied our time. But I do enjoy being out in the air. I wanted, when we moved, to be close to a beach so that I could enjoy the outside and the outdoors, the great outdoors. So it does give me great joy. And walking both with my good lady wife, Sarah, and the dog, and walking out and enjoying the countryside and enjoying meeting people, which is part and parcel of what I've done really all my life, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting to meet new neighbors, new ways of living. A bit. Is it fair to say it's a bit more country or rural? How would you describe it versus where you were in the UK, or where you were in the London?
Well, we were in the Cotswolds, which, if you know the UK, then the Cotswolds is fairly country, as it were. But this is definitely rural Wales, and we are, as I alluded to earlier, ensconced in a wonderful, magical valley, Welsh valley, with rivers at the bottom, and it's beautiful. So yes, we basically spend a lot of our time paddling around in wellies right now, which is quite cool. So it's a beautiful part of the world. But if we were going back to know a bit more about me, from way back when, I've always sort of not been so much in the town as been out in the country. I was actually born in Kings Lynn in Norfolk. So for those of you who knew the beautiful Norfolk countryside, then that's where I came from. A beautiful boy, they used to call them. And it's again a big country area full of Tudor history. Don't get me started. And we used to spend a lot of our time going around these things when I was a child, which is probably where I got some of my historical interest from. And spent many a happy day visiting those various sites, but then went off, had a career in the pharmaceutical industry for about 20 odd years, from carrying a bag all the way up to senior management. And I had a choice at one point of, do I actually stay in the corporate playground and be an MD flying backwards and forwards across the pond effectively, and or at least spending 80 to 100 days a year on a plane between various suppliers? Or I, at the time, had a 3-year-old daughter, and do I really want to spend more time with her? So maybe I should set up a business, which is what I did. I was asked to assist setting up a coaching business. So I went and joined a particular company, set that up, and haven't really looked back since. So I've now been coaching longer than I've worked in corporate industry. So January 2001 was when I became a coach, set up a coaching business. So it's 25 years now, after 20 odd years of working in the pharmaceutical industry. I know. I don't look 27, do I? I mean, what can I say?
You started when you were 12. I get it.
That's it.
So one of the stories that I really appreciated about your origin story, Chris, was that you did come from a successful corporate experience, and for life choice, living your values, your family, you decided to become an entrepreneur. And so you've been successful in pivoting from the corporate crazy, I like to call it. And as a fellow road warrior, I know what it's like to be on the road 100%. It's not your best dad energy when you get home after 4.5 days on the road. So good on you to have made commitment to your daughter and your wife and yourself. Those are not easy choices, because you make really good money in the corporate world. And in the entrepreneurial world, it's definitely a roller coaster. One of the stories that you also shared, which I think might be kind of fun for our listeners, is how you decided not to go for coaching clients in the pharmaceutical industry, but you wanted to prove to yourself that you had what it took, that you had some really simple but effective modalities like the 360. Do you want to talk just briefly about kind of that pivot? And because I think a number of our listeners are coaches or want to be coaches, and this might be, they're coming from the corporate world, so I thought it might be kind of a fun personal transformation story, and the messy middle of that.
There is the messy middle is, it's all based around ego, isn't it? So yours truly was sitting there with a 40-odd-year-old individual thinking, I'm going to make this happen, but how can I do that in a manner that will give me energy and regenerate myself, such that I am feeling powerful and engaged in that conversation? And I recalled, actually, when I first went into the pharmaceutical industry, that, inverted commas, I had to be convinced about the product that I was promoting. I had to fundamentally believe that this was a significantly better product than anything else available in the market, in order that I could put the whole of myself behind promoting it and backing it and endorsing it. So I wanted to recreate the same sense of, you're buying me because Chris Rue is the product, if you like. And if you step out of that corporate crazy and you go across the apparent cliff, but it is only an apparent one, because of course you have agency, you can do stuff. So I had to prove to myself to say, right, in that case, my challenge to myself is that I must not get any business out of the pharmaceutical industry first. I need to prove the product, i.e. myself, and my ability to deliver 360 feedback and coaching approaches must be able to demonstrate that that is good enough, irrespective of any personal connection I have or historical connection with the industry that I've been in for 20 years. And that is exactly what I did. I focused, leaning, of course, into my historic sales, energy, and training and marketing experience from the corporate, notwithstanding that. But I did manage to get into Dell Computers, who I'm sure everybody is aware of as a company, but they were my first client way back when. And so I ticked the box within, I don't know, 2 months of kicking off. And it was a small little gig, but it was enough. It's like your first check. Put the first check, stick it on the wall, keep it, remember it. And it was a validating moment for me. And it proved the product, at which point I was then quite happy to give myself permission to go back and talk to some of the other colleagues that I didn't know. And, you know, over the years, I've done obviously quite a lot of work in the healthcare industry because I have a natural bias into that space anyway. And we work quite a lot with biotechs, interestingly enough.
Yeah. And so many clients, I think, appreciate that you understand their language, their cultures. It gives you an immediate shorthand to be able to communicate effectively. Yeah. Well, I love that story. And the fact that you prove to yourself, and then once you get on the boards, right, replicate that. Bravo you. So we've got about 10 minutes, Chris, before the commercial break. And this is the opportunity maybe to pivot now toward this notion of transformational organization. And I don't know what you think, my friend, but I'm thinking if we just did a bit of a primer for our listeners on what has been the developmental stair step, if I can use that analogy, or the spectrum of different organizational types leading up to Teal. And we want to talk just a little bit about Teal. And then after the break, I'm thinking it'd be fun to talk about what you've seen as some of the challenges of making a transition or a transformation from, can I call it, command and control, kind of a lot of existing organizations are trying to be more next generation, but they're kind of putting lipstick on a pig, if I can be blunt.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk just a little bit about that
Certainly.
history? And let's bring in the Tudor. What did Henry VIII do at some point?
Well, I may just be able to do that because the spectrum effectively was illustrated by this work by Frederick Laloux, wrote a book, Reinventing Organizations, in 2014-15. And in fact, the very book I have here. And it is effectively applying the Richard of York gave battle in vain, i.e. the rainbow colors, to red, orange, yellow, amber, etc. And he applied these colors across the spectrum of how organizations develop their consciousness, effectively their effectiveness in leadership. So the most relevant ones were he looked over a period of centuries and decades and years, as opposed to hours and minutes, if you like, and went all the way back to, if you like, earliest colors, which actually weren't even on his earliest radar. But if we think about how families were brought together, they were brought together as units, and the whole purpose of the family was to forage, get food, and survive. If you go all the way back to 100,000 years plus ago. And so there wasn't that much need for management leadership too much. There was a little inter-tribe, if you like, inter-family ructions on the borders, if you like, but everybody was really looking out for themselves and trying to keep the family unit together. There was relative equanimity in one perverse sense between everybody. But what then happened is human beings being human beings, realized that there was power to be had and grabbed, and there were therefore various ways of doing that. And the red, if you like, end of that spectrum would be if I basically take control and manage by fear and organize and control you, by which if you don't agree with me, I'll simply chop your head off, then that would be a quite effective way of leadership. it was terrorizing people. Attila the Hun, it would, if you like, be a red type approach. And you still see that strategy applied in certain strata of society even today, and that the failure, the price of non-conformance in those organizations is pretty terminal. So that's a structure, if you like, of leadership that people do today. But what we're trying to get,
I would say, without being political, there's a number of dictatorships or becoming dictatorships all over the world that use that predator-prey management style. If you're with me, loyalty, oaths. If you're not with me, you're gone.
Yes. And of course, the premise of that is entirely ego-based, and it's centered around the leader and the leadership strategy being right. And there is no concept of the other. So if you move from keeping that red space, if you like, to the left-hand side of a rainbow, red, amber, yellow, green, and teal, which is where we're going across the spectrum, if you like. So the red space is this Attila the Hun, if you like, type piece. If you move into the amber orange type level, you're moving into a sense where consciousness is shifting, and that people get a sense of the other, that the other actually exists and might have something to contribute. However, they're still being led, and they're still being led by a hierarchy. What people have learned from the red situation is that if I keep on chopping off heads, people tend to stop liking me after a while. And also I tend to lose my leadership, which isn't really that effective after a period of time. So maybe I can do something rather better and more productive. And so the idea, if you like, of styles that emerge that are more contributory come to the fore, and you end up with more towards a command and control, but we're not trying to kill each other if you don't agree with me. So that command and control piece really was in operation, having moved away from the red of the likes of tribal warfare into the last 1,000 years, and you got that much more into the Henry VIII type absolute command and control. He was pretty good with the axe, though, to be fair, so he did use quite a bit of fear effectively in getting rid of his enemies one way or another. But that said, the closer you come towards today, people are then starting to take more and more notice of the way that we actually lead and engage people and get people to do what we want to do.
So would you say, Chris, that historically maybe Henry VIII was a bit of an organizational innovator and used roles and hierarchy?
Well, he had a hierarchy all around him, but it was the feudal it was the nobility system that he used quite effectively, but it was very much in a red way, I would suggest. It really wasn't in a very empowering way, let's say. I mean, the principle of meritocracy, if you like, really appeared in the amber orange area post this time, where people recognized the value of the people around them, and that if they could motivate them and engage them to get things done, without them having to tell them every single step of the way what they wanted to do or let fear do that, then they would be more productive. They would actually get more out of those people. In order to do that, however, the fundamental, if you like, operating system that was used was still a hierarchical one. So the hierarchy principle being I down or up this pyramid, either information comes up to me and I make a decision, or I disseminate the information down, but it still sits with me. And what I found with my coaching, and Sarah was absolutely in the space, was that we were coaching people in the late 90s, early noughties, and putting them back into systems that were operating in this orange space. And very much many businesses today still operate in this command and control structure, which is a hierarchical space. And it was one of the earliest arbiters of that was the Model T Ford and Henry Ford and his systems. He really mechanized processes, and he engaged in a hierarchical structure system, which is still in operation today and broadly used today. But the challenge was, if that's a operating system that is like a PC, how do you create a Mac? How do you create iOS systems which just work and actually create meaning for people who work there? And what we realized was that it was only those leaders who, in their gift, recognized that the people around them could work far better if they were empowered and able to make their own decisions, that would be really, really helpful. So they would have to do something, which we might come back to very shortly to elaborate that continued journey. Does that make sense? I'm not sure how we are on time.
So let's finish, if we can, through to Teal, and then we'll take a short break. Yeah,
if you're okay with that.
Keep going. This is fascinating, and thank you so much for bringing in some of the Tudor history. Appreciate that.
That's all right. So having migrated from red through amber into orange, we're now moving into the green area, which, if you like, the amber orange is really up to the 80s, 90s. And the best example of orange, you could think about the Enron scandal, where the whole purpose was really everybody was worrying about the shareholder value, not about the people employed in Enron. There's one of the examples that often we talk about going back in time. But if you think about the movement then from into the green place, which is a preemptor for Teal. This is sort of in the period of the noughties, really, 2000 into 2010. And you see there people, and late 90s, people were reacting because they were saying, I am a person, I am an individual, I have thought, I have capability. I'm not a number or a widget to be doing that little part of the process down here that people had mechanized me into. So we have a lot in this green space, which is metaphors of family values associated with it, if you like. So the family, the principle of the family, which is listening and supporting and engaging people. But it also very much sits in the world of pluralism and accepting all the voices, i.e. everybody should be heard. In principle, a great idea. But have you ever tried running a meeting of 30 people where everybody has to be heard? It's a great challenge, isn't it? So therein in that problem lies the challenge of how do you get a situation where everybody can be heard and be considered and be pointing in the same direction from a leadership standpoint. But we can't wait for 30 people to talk. It will literally take far too long. And then by the time the 30th person's finished talking, the first two have disagreed violently with whatever was being said at 27. You need, it just gums up the work, slows everything down. So consensus management, consensus leadership has often been illustrated as relatively ineffective leadership. It slows everything down. Yes, you get everybody on the train, but the train is the last in the station of the fifth station back because everybody else has actually made it to the concert on time and there's no room now. So Teal was born out of a requirement of saying we have to change that system. And I wonder what would happen instead of having a hierarchy of leadership decisions, we had a hierarchy of purpose. And we create networks of teams who all understand their purpose independently, can work independently, knowing where they're all focused on. And maybe we might get rather better at it. And in the parallel or metaphor that's often used for that is the amoeba, i.e. that it envelops a little piece over here and it envelops a little piece over here. And it can move independently in that sense. But that's also not to say that there's a single-celled organization that hasn't got a clue what's going on. So it has its own flaws as a parallel. But
so I like to think of it as more like a forest. A Teal organization is like a forest that communicates, yes. And it has this idea of seasonality and independence, but it communicates.
So you remind me of some fantastic work by Giles Hutchins and around the whole role, if you like, of nature as, in one sense, as a great metaphor for the way that everything is connected. And Teal thinking next generation thing bases itself very much on the connections that an organization is very much that. It is things, people that are connected, and if you can actually harmonize and harness that thinking and harness the collective purpose, then you're really, really onto something. And in truth, the reason that we started in Parallax to do more organizational development and culture work was the old Peter Drucker statement, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Because if you get the culture right, then whatever strategy you choose to impart is far more likely to engage and be successful within that organization.
So let's pause for the moment on this. And if you're enjoying this information that Chris has been sharing, I invite you to join the Regenerate community on Substack called Regeneration in Real Life. We'll be right back after this valuable offer. Please stay tuned for more of Chris Rue's transformational organization and the messy middle of transformational leadership.
You're listening to Regenerate with Captain Dave, your personal regenerator on K4HD Radio. We'll be right back. Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you ready to regenerate and live the life of your dreams? Start the transformation now. Call Captain Dave at 253-237-2558. Stop overthinking. Again, call 253-237-2558 or go to regenerativeworldgroup.com to book a free, no-obligation clarity call. Let's get back to Regenerate right here on K4HD Radio for more life-changing transformations. Here's your host, Captain Dave, your personal regenerator.
Welcome back. So if you're just now joining us, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation with my friend and business coach, regenerative life and leadership transformation coach, Chris Rue from Parallax Partners. Also midlife warrior, which we want to talk about near the end of the show, because I think that's a really exciting initiative that you and Sarah and others are doing in the world. So Chris is a very experienced transformational thought leader, consultant, coach. He's passionate about supporting and developing leaders beyond their current capacity. I can tell you that's what he's delivered for me, very outcome-based coaching. And we've been talking about the theme organizational and leadership transformation, and partly the messy middle of how organizational consciousness has been evolving since the tribal off with his head era of red organizations and moving our way up that spectrum to teal or purpose-driven, self-managed, evolutionary purpose kind of an organization. So Chris, before we talk maybe about a specific example that you have had experience with helping organizations move from, shall I say, a lower part of the rainbow spectrum and aspiring to become not just lipstick or marketing spin, evolutionary purpose and self-managed, but actually really trying to make a fundamental consciousness and design their organization to be in alignment with those values of teal. Anything that you wanted to say before we jump into a specific example about the teal organization?
Only that teal is not a one-stop shop. So that it's based upon three fundamental principles of engaging with evolutionary purpose. So we're getting really clear about what it is you're doing, employing self-management techniques and approaches, and having a concentrated focus on wholeness practices. Those three principles guide the general principle of teal or next generation leadership. That said, every single organization creates its own bespoke version of that. So you may have these three headings, but how each organization interprets that is very different. And it really leans into maybe the heritage of that organization or what it supports or the way that it operates. And there are some fantastic organizations out there that illustrate these points. And I'm happy to elaborate on one or two of them. And certainly I can give you a personal experience of organizations that we've helped that might be useful.
Yeah, I think putting a face on this would be incredibly helpful. And maybe if I can just start the idea of specific types of organizations as we move our way through that spectrum. So the military in most countries, would you claim that that's probably kind of reddish moving into orange territory?
It's really interesting because the military is often used as an orange metaphor. However, I have a codicil to that, and that is that the military actually understand leadership and servant leadership rather better than almost anybody else. If you've ever heard the phrase of the lieutenants, or depending on which side of the pond you're at, and the platoon eating first and the guys going first, rather than the officers, then you get the idea of servant leadership. And it's not necessarily about that. You need people who are going to make strategy and and interpret strategy and deliver actions. But it's not as simple as just saying, yeah, military is all about command and control. Actually, the military are superb at leadership, and they should be. We hope they would be, and they are. And they have an awful lot of lessons. But if you look and dive deeply into it, it's so much more than command and control. It's not just, there it is, go and do it, do as you're told. No, they have to interpret, they have to react, they have to flex. And a very good partner of ours often refers to the Prussian battles in the Prussian War, where a 250,000 strong army beat a 3 million Prussian army because of its ability to be agile and move around and react quickly rather than the slow command and control orders going all the way up to the generals at the top and taking an hour or two to get all the way back down. A classic old school, but illustration of the problem with hierarchical development as opposed to local people, local colonels, local captains, knowing the main event, knowing the main purpose of what was trying to do, and they could operate for themselves to take the particular piece. So it's just not that black and white, unfortunately. But it is an interesting.
I'm so glad that you reminded me of that nuance, because yes, it is quite remarkable how the military, and certainly the modern military, at least in our country, where if a commander gives you an instruction, an order, and it's not supporting the Constitution, or it's not legal, and I know there's a lot of interpretation about what is legal, but the officer or even the entry man or woman has an obligation to challenge that order. And that's very much well beyond red and orange and green, right? That's Absolutely. Really evolutionary purpose and self-managed.
It is. It's empowerment. It's local empowerment and distributed leadership. So people actually have the opportunity to make a decision. Say, hey, no, don't go that way. Go this way. Otherwise, you're going to get your head blown off. Otherwise, you ended up with, you look at the civil wars and people were marching into battle because that was the order.
Yeah.
It was, cannon fodder. Very simple but different examples. So coming back to leadership in the modern day, the idea, though, has some similarities. So as you come up that color band, you get to much more distributed, enabled, engaged leaders letting go of their crowns. And in fact, Ricardo Semler of Semco said exactly that. We're asking leaders to let go of their crowns, because the principle of this is asking teal leaders to raise their consciousness and massively increase their coaching skills to enable others to do their work, rather than all the decisions sitting on their shoulders and everything coming back to them.
Yeah.
They don't. There's an apparent loss of control is what people worry about. But actually, if you ask anybody who's gone through some delegation development, you actually find that if you've got people you're delegating effectively to, you gain control. You don't lose control.
That's been my experience as a leader of high performance teams. It's really creating that environment where people can come and do their best and most creative work. And the people that are closest to the work often have the greatest innovations and insights about how to do the work with higher quality, more cost effectively, but yet coordinated so that the left hand and the right hand are working together. So you had a specific example that you wanted to share about a company that you personally had your fingerprints in helping guide them through their transformation.
So there was an organization that we helped, and they adopted the principles, these next generation principles in that organization. And the short version, bearing in mind time, is that because the leader, number one, let go and enabled and recognized, and he would say, it's all about people, isn't it? Because it is. And he let people come up with their ideas. He gave them a real challenge and clarity on the purpose of why they were there. and then let some people run with it. And if this was in a biotech area, and the short version is that essentially we'd been working with them for about 6 months, and they had gone to the extent where people were feeling that empowered and engaged that they could go off and work together. This particular group had taken themselves off to do a particular piece of work around part of the piece that they were working on, and effectively shaved 3 months off the development life cycle on their own bat without asking permission or whatever, which was just outstanding, because they felt if we do this, we do that, we do it, and they could prove the case, and then they could take that back and say, here, look at this. This is what we've done. This is how it can work, and this is what we could do. What's not to like about that? They didn't have to go up the flagpole and down the flagpole to get permission for each step of this. They've just got on and did it. And I mean, that's a very, very good example of what happens if you let people be creative, give them the outline of the football pitch and say, that's where you can play, but you can do whatever you like in it. And see what they come
Chris,
up with.
One of the things that I have been learning from you, and as I read more of Frederick Laroux's book, which just escaped me.
Reinventing Organizations.
That's it. Thank you. Is how vital the willingness of the leader to kind of suck at this transformation a little bit, right? They may initially be very supportive of it because they understand intellectually everything that you've just described, but emotionally, or their identity, if it doesn't shift as the organization is transforming itself, it can blow up. Is that correct?
Effectively, yes. If the CEO or the MD or the guy at the top is not on board with this, ultimately it will fall over, because they will at some point get nervous about the fact that there is something that I am not directly telling people to do, X, Y, and Z. And it's one of those things, if I see the results, fine. But if I don't, then I'm going to come over you like a ton of bricks. And that has a problem in terms of the tone and the piece that's being set. You're still really applying a command and control piece, as opposed to saying, I don't know where we're going. This is the ambition. I know you're an expert in that particular field and you're an expert in that particular field. I need you guys to go away and come up with something. Let's see where we go. And I'm here to enable you to move forward. So what they have to be strong on is being really clear on the purpose, being clear on helping people focus in the right direction. But they are not, to your earlier point, the people who actually know what's going on at the coalface directly. They can't. They're just simply not. Nobody has that capacity. I've long said, if you've got a team of 10 people and you increase everybody in that team by 5%, you've got a 50% improvement in the overall productivity of the team. You're not going to get a 50% improvement in the productivity of the leader. So there's a fundamental exercise problem in trying to assume from your own ego that if I improve myself, that will be brilliant. That will do the whole thing. The development work that the leaders have to do is much more about letting go. But by engaging and involving their leaders in the outcomes that they want, in the purpose that they want. Letting go is not abdication. It is involvement and dissemination.
And to that point, well articulated. Thank you so much. One of the things that you and I have been exploring together, and we have some interesting opportunities with a fast-growing software company, is this Deliberately Developmental Organization, DDO. Can you describe a little bit about culture change and how you, Sarah, and others have successfully facilitated this leadership transformation, and maybe providing some scaffolding, some support for the leader who might get scared and try to return to the command and control comfort zone?
So deliberately developmental organizations are, as the name suggests, those organizations who really fundamentally believe in the principles of feedback, that they look at the opportunity for everybody to understand and recognize that they are flawed human beings, that we're all working on something, be it the leader at the top or the new person just coming in. We're all learning. Every day is a school day. We're all learning something, and there's always something going wrong. The difference with deliberately developmental organizations is that they make it overt. So they essentially will have something like a bulletin board or transparency on the HR processes that they engage in that recognizes that, yeah, I'm Chris, I talk an awful lot. And in fact, if I'm in a meeting, I might over talk, I might try and take over the meeting or want to hear the sound of my own voice. So my development piece is shutting up. And I would share that, and it would be available for everybody to know that. And likewise, someone else in the room may want to build their experience or their ability to run meetings or their ability to have their opinion heard, and they're rather shy and retiring or introverted, and they want that would equally well be available. And at the end of meetings, and very much part and parcel of how they manage and lead with each other, they would be sharing and setting goals and setting development opportunities and ideas. I'm asking Chris to take notes this meeting, because we're not going to hear, because I know he's trying to work on actually keeping quiet. So what we're going to do is we're going to give him the task of making notes this meeting, which is a nice way of shutting me up. But it does at least ask me to say, what was it exactly you said? Can I just confirm? I'm making a note. But you kind of get
mine would be adding too much value. So I would be invited to be a note taker as well.
So you've got opportunities with it, and then DDO organizations really embrace this, and they embrace the principle of feedback, and therefore they work on a feedback culture. So everything is, how did that go? Did that go well? What did work for you? What didn't work for you? And I'm listening to it, because I recognize I'm not perfect, and I recognize that you're not perfect. And between us, we've just done a fantastic thing, but we did it because we recognized and worked with each other, rather than getting really cross really quickly because you're not listening to me, and I know what I'm saying is right, and you're definitely wrong because you haven't listened to me.
So, Chris, not to put you on the spot, and in your experience, if organizations are willing to stay the course and move from traditional command and control, or what I like to call lipstick on a pig, they structurally have not really changed, but they give their employees lip service that they want to empower them and evolutionary purpose, but the organization really isn't there. If somebody, a leader listening, is able to stay the course and go through this messy middle of a next generation leader and organization, have you got any evidence of the return on investment, the EBITDA? Is there any financial results that you can point to?
Well, all I can point to in terms of going back to that organization that I talked about, we actually calibrated because it was a part unit within a bigger organization. So I could have effectively an analysis of the original larger organization and this pilot group, if you like, of 60 odd people at the end, which is quite a big unit. But they had the autonomy, which says a lot about the leadership of the whole organization, to adopt this principle within that unit and apply it. And it worked. But how did we assess it and give ourselves some value? We actually used a technique that I'm sure many people listening to this show will know, with Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, since relabeled, but at the time we were talking about it in that way. And we calibrated how the levels of trust, lack of accountability, lack of conflict or attention to the overall result, the 4 or 5 significant elements of Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, and measured the existing organization and the new organization 6 months down the track. And what we were able to demonstrate was that by adopting these principles, the organization actually that we were working with improved in the area of, improved their level of trust with each other, improved their level of commitment to deliver stuff, and their level of attention to the overall result by some 15% as compared to the rest of the organization. And it demonstrated their ability. And as I earlier, the example I talked about was that they shortened the half-life of the development time for that drug to market piece, which was all very, very good. And that will translate, if you like, down at the other end of the marketplace in commercial, 3 months extra commercial under patent for that product. And that was just 6 months in. Where it went to after that, what I can tell you is that the organization ultimately pivoted towards the area that they were working on, which was quite ironic as well.
That's a great result, great outcome. And Chris, we're sadly out of time, and I hope that we can invite you back and maybe include Sarah, and we'll talk about the Midlife Warrior program.
That'd be great.
Because I don't want to start something and not be able to deep dive with you on that. Hey, gang, on behalf of Chris Rue and the Talk4 Media team, this has been Regenerate. I hope that we met your expectations. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, please like and comment. We're always grateful so that the algorithm gods will smile favorably on us. And next week, we'll have a dear colleague, Yannick Lefebvre, who's a Belgian Olympian, and he's going to be talking about the messy middle of this theme, beyond the podium. So it's not just about the identity as a high-performing athlete, because once you earn the medal or you've won the race, now what? So we look forward to seeing you next week. On behalf of the team, stay healthy, stay safe. We need you.
Thank you for listening to Regenerate with Captain Dave on K4HD Radio. We invite you to give yourself grace and embrace the messy middle. See you every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Until then, you got this.